The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday, February 2nd. Happy Ayn Rand birthday to everybody. Ayn Rand was born 117 years ago in St. Petersburg, Russia on February 2nd. And we are all grateful and grateful to everything that she did in her life, and massive beneficiaries of her artistic genius and her philosophical genius. So happy birthday, Ayn Rand. Rand's Day, I think Harry Binswanger has coined today as Rand's Day. February 2nd, 118. Am I? Oh, shit. All right, it's 118. My math is, that's right, it's 2023. God, I was doing it off of, okay. I was doing it off of 2022. Sorry. Yes, 118. It wasn't a math error. It was a where we are today error. All right, let's jump in. Let's start today with a discussion of kind of a quick picture of the U.S. economy. As you know, yesterday the Fed did what everybody expected it to do and what I told you they would do, which is raise interest rates by 25 basis points. They also indicated that they would continue raising interest rates by 25 basis points, probably through the spring, to the beginning of the spring, so probably in the next couple of meetings. So through March, probably, they would raise by another 50 basis points. Which I think surprised some people who thought maybe they were going to be retracting much faster. But the reality is that the market as expressed, and the people trading in the marketplace and financial markets actually expect interest rates not only to peak here really, really soon, and for the Fed maybe to raise one more time or to raise one more time, but maybe not the second time and then not raise anymore, but not just not raise anymore. But the market seems to really be expecting the interest rates to start coming down later this year. If you look at the 10-year bond, if you look at interest rates 10 years out, there is an expectation that interest rates are coming down. That means that the expectation is right now that inflation has been basically subdued, that there is no inflation, and there's not going to be inflation, and basically we're heading towards 0%, zero interest rates, or 1% interest rates, very, very low interest rates, again, after this big increase in interest rates that has happened over the last year or so. So the financial markets are certainly expecting interest rates to be very, very low a year and 2 years into the future. They expect this bout of, they expect low inflation and us to go back to the kind of pre-COVID years of 0% inflation. That surprises me because I would have expected interest rates to stay high for a more prolonged period of time, and for interest rates to normalize. Zero is not a normal rate of interest, and markets don't seem to agree with me. Now, granted, markets, while they're probably the best we have in terms of forecasting, are also pretty bad at it. Markets did not expect the inflation that we got. Markets did not predict that. Indeed, very few people did predict that, and the people who did predict it, like Peter Schiff, predicted much higher interest rates and much higher inflation, and that has not happened yet. Granted, we don't know. We'll see what happens in the future. So almost no forecasts made by individual human beings or made by markets are any good at the end of the day. They all seem to collapse. So the reality is that interest rates are fairly high today, and they seem to be going higher, that the Fed explicitly is not saying they will decrease interest rates, and indeed the Fed seems to be suggesting that they will go up another 50 basis points and then stay at that level through the end of the year. So the Fed is saying high interest rates here to stay for a few months at least. Markets are saying high interest rates, but then they're going to decline pretty quickly. I probably tend to think that interest rates will start declining later this year, primarily because I think there's going to be a recession. I don't think the Fed will be able to resist lowering interest rates while there's a recession and try to boost economic activity. So if we go broader than just interest rates, what is interesting, one of the most interesting, I think, phenomena in the realm of the U.S. economy right now is the fact that we just got job opening numbers and for the fourth quarter for last year, and it's truly stunning the number of jobs right now, the number of want ads that exist right now, the number of job openings that exist right now that are not being filled. Given if you take into account the fact that interest rates are high, massive layoffs in tech all over the place. We hear tech layoffs, and yet the fact is there are massive job openings that are not being taken. Unemployment is super low, so all that means, I think, is that the people who are losing jobs in tech are finding new jobs very, very quickly. And that businesses right now are creating more jobs than there are people willing to fill them. And that is, it's surprising to me. It's surprising to me in the sense that a lot of people, myself, I think Peter Schiff too, expected there to be already a recession, expected zombie companies to be going bankrupt right now, expected far greater layoffs and people not being able to find jobs, expected unemployment rate to go down, and companies fearful of the coming recession, shrinking the number of jobs they have, not increasing them, not putting out more and more want ads. So something is going on in the U.S. economy that we didn't predict. The U.S. economy is far more, it appears, resilient, at least at the level of jobs, than I think I predicted and many others predicted. There seem to be, at least for now, far fewer zombie companies than we expected. Far fewer bankruptcies are happening than we expected. And this is all, I guess, super interesting. It's all really super interesting just to see this happening, where economists, I'll include myself as one of them, don't quite understand. And I've always said, going back 30 years probably, the U.S. economy is always surprisingly and shockingly resilient to shocks, to regulations, to increased taxes, to all these things that we always think, oh my God, U.S. economy can't deal with this. Think about, ultimately we came out of the Great Recession, how bad it felt. It felt like the world was coming to an end, and then it rebounded. It truly is amazing. Look at the NASDAQ. Look how the NASDAQ is doing. To start off 2023, the stock market is booming right now. It's stock market booming right now, by the way, at the same time as the Federal Reserve not only is increasing interest rates, but is actually shrinking its balance sheet. So it's actually reducing, technically, the amount of money in the economy. So a lot of things happening that I guess you wouldn't really expect to happen. And economics is always much more complicated than we expect, always surprising in its result. I still expect a recession, but it's taking its time. And the odds of a recession keep going down. And yet I still expect a recession. Everything that I know about economics suggests that it's coming, but I don't get this. I really don't. And one of the things that comes out of this clearly is that a lot of Americans are not working. I don't know why they're not working. A lot of them are retiring early. So people have money, but they're retiring early. But one of the things that this really illustrates is the shortage of labor, is how much more we need, how much more immigrants we need in order to fill these jobs and to really keep our economy humming along here. So this is super interesting. It's super interesting, and I'll keep you updated on the progress of the U.S. economy as we go along here, and see if we can make sense of some of it, see if any of my predictions and other economists' predictions actually come true. as we move forward. But oops, what did I do? That's weird. You guys are still there, right? I somehow closed the window that I didn't intend to close. Let's bring it back up and make sure that everything is going okay. Yep, you guys are still there. It looks like. It appears. Huh. All right, there we go. And then that closed. All right. No. I get it. Okay, that's over there. Okay. Anyway, so that is pay attention to the stock market right now. I mean, every stock, Bitcoin right now, gone through the roof since the beginning of the year. Went from 16,000 to almost, I think now 24,000, and this happens when the expectation is moving forward that interest rates are low. So NASDAQ goes up, tech stocks goes up, speculative stocks goes up, Bitcoin goes up. Everything that's speculative goes up when the expectation is that interest rates are going to go lower significantly in the future. So there clearly is something going on there. I don't know where the stealth recession is when job openings are at 11 million. There are 11 million jobs that are unfilled right now. I don't know where the stealth recession is when wages went up in the fourth quarter, not as fast as they did in the third quarter, but still fairly fast. I don't know where the stealth recession is when unemployment is still super low, or where we're not seeing really corporate bankruptcies in any place. Now, maybe it's all coming. But so far, I don't see a recession out there. All kinds of jobs. I mean, what kind of jobs? The tech jobs. A lot of, obviously, what you'd call blue-collar skilled work. So for years now, we've had shortages in welders. There's a massive shortage of employees in the construction industry. Massive shortage. All across the board, there are jobs that are not being filled. Now, there is an uptick in layoffs. We saw that but the uptick in layoff is still not dramatic. It's not. It's not massive. So it's. What can I say? It's interesting, and we'll see how this is working out. There is a falling real wages, but the falling real wages again is not dramatic because you saw significant wage increases last year. Last year wages rose, and particularly for blue collar jobs, raises. I think I did a show on this that wages for blue collar job actually rose the fastest in the economy, and they grew faster than the inflation. Yes, I mean a lot of the very high wages in Silicon Valley are coming down. We talked about that yesterday, about wages being cut. Where was it? At Intel. At Intel and other places like that. So in the U.S., at least, we'll get to other countries in a minute, these are really, I mean, they're interesting numbers. It's an interesting phenomena, and we'll see what happens. I expect that layoffs are going to intensify, job openings are going to decline, and unemployment will rise. I still expect that to happen, but George Reisman might have a theory of what's happening, but George has not been very good at prediction. Never has. I mean, he's a great economist, but he's not been good at prediction. I remember George saying gold was going to go to 30,000. That was in 1987, I think. So economists, even really, really good economists, are not good at predicting the economy. And the reality is that the economy happens at the micro level, at the business level. And the U.S. economy, in spite of everything, is super flexible and super dynamic, and manages to overcome many of the obstacles placed on it by politicians and by regulators and by the tax man and by the Federal Reserve and by everything else. And we manage to somehow do okay. And again, we will see here. We will see here in the next few months how this evolves, and I will keep you up to date on these news highlights. All right. Let's talk about the U.S. Navy. a little bit, and this is in the context of a story we're going to be following over the next few years, maybe next few decades, if I'm still doing the show in the next few decades. And that is, the increasing fear of war with China, the increasing worry about a Chinese attack on Taiwan, an American commitment to defend Taiwan, and just the increase, I'd say, challenges that we face from the Chinese that might turn military. And suddenly it appears like the U.S. believes that is an issue, that our policymakers believe that. I think sometimes these things become self-fulfilling prophecies because you make strategic mistakes that kind of put you in a position where, where you're playing chicken with the other side. We'll get into that another time. But the reality is that the United States is working is pivoting to a focus on China and trying to restrain China and trying to position the United States to be ready and able to deal with a Chinese threat and a Chinese war with Taiwan and with the United States involvement. To deal with that, the United States is boosting its alliances in the area. So Japan is increasing its defense budget significantly, and the United States is supporting that and increase its alliance with them. Just today, or yesterday, maybe it was yesterday, today it was announced that the U.S. has come to an agreement with the Philippines. The Philippines, just a few years ago, was kicking Americans out and wanting to shut down bases and restrict U.S. Involvement in the Philippines. Well, they've just cut a deal for 4 additional military bases in the Philippines for the United States. Again, the Philippines strategically important in terms of access to China and access to the Taiwan Straits, primarily for the Air Force, but also for the Navy. So having an additional 4 bases in the Philippines makes sense if you're preparing for potential conflict with the Chinese. Now, again, whether it's such a conflict, whether we should be preparing or not, I'll leave that to another show. But the reality is that we are preparing, and you can see that in what our politicians and what the Biden administration is doing. And here they've set up these bases. The Philippines, of course, have disputes on this in the South China Sea over certain islands and who owns those islands and where the international waters are, where Philippines waters are, where Chinese waters are. There's constant disputes there. The Philippines has a strong interest in aligning itself with the United States. There's also right now diplomatic battles going on between the U.S. and China over trying to get Indonesia. Indonesia, another super strategic country in this part of the world, in the again, South China Sea. The United States would love to have a closer military relationship with Indonesia, but China also wants a close relationship with Indonesia, but has conflicts over territorial waters also with them. Here, I think the Chinese probably have the upper hand over the Americans, yet to be determined. So first, there's this interesting 4 new bases in the Philippines for the U.S., but then you kind of dig deeper into the United States position vis-a-vis its Navy. A crucial element in any conflict with China is going to be the conditioning, the state of the U.S. Navy. The Chinese Navy is bigger, but the U.S. Navy is superior by every measure, superior to the Chinese Navy. But can it maintain that superiority over how long of a time? And is the United States Navy in decline while the Chinese Navy is in ascent? And you get a lot of mixed signals here. But let me give you 2 negative ones for the U.S. One is that it turns out the U.S. warships have seen fewer days at sea since 2011 on a regular basis because they're breaking down more often. And it's taking longer for them to get repaired. The Pentagon is struggling to repair the ships. When they break down, they don't have, maybe this is where the job openings are, but they don't have sufficient staff, and they don't have sufficient resources, and maybe they're inefficient, maybe they're unproductive. There are lots of reasons why, but the reality is that American ships, because of maintenance issues, are not on the sea anywhere near as much as they were in 2011, and this suggests a deteriorating U.S. fleet. Now, a lot of new ships are coming on board. So, for example, The U.S. just launched its latest brand new aircraft carrier, and a number of new aircraft carriers are coming, other destroyers and so on. But even here, the news is not all rosy. So, for example, the United States is developing a new class of nuclear submarines called the Columbia, which will replace the aging nuclear submarine, the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines that it deploys today. We have 12 Columbia-class submarines are being developed that would replace 14 Ohio-class submarines. By every measure, the Columbia submarines, when they are deployed, will be the best submarines in the world. There's no question about that. They'll have the best technology, both stealth technology and all other types of technology in order to do this. However, the officials overseeing the development of the U.S. submarine, I guess are now saying they're not sure exactly when the submarines are going to be deployed. The plan is deployed in 2031. They're not sure they're in schedule. It's kind of spooky when they say they're not sure they're in schedule. They're spending $132 billion, 132 billion on this program. The first submarine alone will cost I think it will cost $15 billion or so, is estimated. Who knows how much it'll cost? And this is 2022 dollars, not 2031 dollars. So they're not sure they will be able to deploy them in 2031. They're not sure how many. They're just not sure. So there's a whole report that's coming out about these submarines basically saying, we don't know. We don't know how many, how much it's going to cost, how many are going to be ready, when they're going to be ready. And that's a little scary and spooky when the U.S. Navy is saying we're spending $132 billion on something and we don't exactly know what's going on. This is a project that's being done by General Dynamics and Huntington Ingalls Industries. Those two companies are helping together building the Columbia. They're claiming, no, everything's fine, everything's on track. But the auditors are not so sure. So just another warning sign, as the government becomes more bureaucratized, as the dollar numbers get bigger, as the U.S. government is less focused on protecting individual rights and therefore focused on things like the military, and it focused on so many other things. The more of this nonsense happens, the more corruption there is, the more inefficiency there is, the more bureaucracy there is, and the more billions disappear, billions get abused, get misused, and the more timelines get extended. The new class of aircraft carriers, best in the world by far, huge delays, cost a lot more money, still not 100% working even though it's out at sea. The only way to deal with this is to shrink government to what it's actually supposed to do, and then laser focus on those things that it's supposed to do them really, really, really well. This goes back even to my comments about policing. If state governments and local governments just focus on the one responsibility, on which is the major responsibility of policing, and did that really, really, really well, and spent the amount of money necessary to do it really, really, really well, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems we have with police. By the way, I've seen now some of the statistics about particularly the Memphis police. The Memphis police spends per cop or per resident of Memphis a lot less money than many other police forces do, and they train their policemen a lot less than other police forces do. So the fact that this happened in Memphis maybe should not be too surprising. Training, improving the quality and training of our police should be priority number one. Higher than homelessness, higher than poverty, higher than redistribution, higher than regulation, higher than food inspectors, higher than a gazillion other inspectors. Should be almost the only priority, but surely should be priority number one of state and local governments, and it's ridiculous and awful that it is not. Private security might be better, they might not be better. Private security, it's not clear that private military forces in Iraq were better than the U.S. military. It's not clear that private military forces in Russia right now, the Wagner Group, are better than the Russian forces. It's not clear at all that private security would be better. It depends how you paid them. It depends what the incentive structure you built into it. Private police forces could be far more brutal, depending on what kind of liability laws you imposed on them. But that all relates to government police forces as well. So the one thing that government is supposed to do is use of force. I think it would be far, 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 far better than any private element, because it would be controlled by objective law. But if you don't put the resources into it, if you don't focus a mind around it, if you don't devote the thought to it, then it's not going to work. And that's exactly what's happening without police forces. Just a quick story, just a quickie, and that is, remember we talked about California drought, and maybe these storms would reduce it. And it turns out the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada, which is responsible for most of the water in California, is at record levels. It is the highest it's been since 1995. It is huge amounts of snow, in other words. And the drought is probably over in California, at least for now. So don't worry about drought California, not that you should. As I've often said, drought is a man-made phenomena in the modern world. There are no droughts unless human beings create them or sustain them or substantiate them. All right, let's see. We want to talk about the Ukraine war. So quickly on Ukraine, I'll just say, and we'll make this really short, I'll just say it really does appear that the Russians are getting ready for a major offensive against Ukraine, probably in the east and the Luhansk province, probably to try to take back some of the territory that the Ukrainians took back from the Russians a few months ago in the Luhansk province, probably to break through Bakhmut and into further gains in the Donetsk area. So it does look like Russia is devoting a lot of resources for this, bringing in a lot of people, bringing a lot of equipment into this area. There are going to be some really, really, really bloody battles in Ukraine over the next few months. It's going to get super ugly. The Russians are going to just throw tens of thousands of young people, not trained very well, into the battlefield. They're going to get slaughtered. Ukrainians are going to get slaughtered. It is just going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to be horrible. And it really is, I don't know. If you haven't been to war, I don't think you can fully understand how awful it is and how disgusting it is and how horrible it is and how useless and meaningless and it is. And the fact that particularly those who support Russia glorify war and make war out to be this wonderful thing. And it's just horrific. And the idea that Putin has gone to war, initiated this war, in which it appears that not tens of thousands of people will die, but hundreds of thousands of young people will die, and not just die, but have their lives destroyed by being injured and have their lives destroyed by being soldiers on the battlefield in such brutal and barbaric condition. It's so barbaric. It's so horrific. And I know there are forces out there that want to glorify war, the whole Bronze Age mentality, the whole Andrew Tate mentality of, muscle over brains. It is truly horror, and truly sad. And it would be great if there was a way to end this war quickly. And of course, the only way to end this war quickly is for Ukraine to win it quickly. Unfortunately, I don't think it can, given the circumstances. I don't think anybody's willing to give Ukrainians the tools to win it quickly. NATO could win this war very quickly, but NATO does not want to. NATO does not want to do it, and does not want to engage at the level where they could win it quickly because they're afraid of a nuclear response. And as to the reason for the war, there is no reason for this war. The reason for this war is Putin's ego. The reason for this war is Putin hubris. The reason for this war is Putin mysticism. The reason for the war is complete and utter irrationality and emotionalism and whim-driven nationalist mysticism by Putin. And there's no other reason for this war. There's no legitimate reason for this war. This war is 100% on Putin and the Russians' heads. and it is, they should rot in hell for eternity for launching this war and pretending like there's any kind of excuse for it, because there is none, zero, zilch. And if you'd ever been in a war, if you'd acted, for a day in a war, if you realized the savagery, what war institutes, and how most of the people in the United States who support Russia wouldn't survive a day, maybe you wouldn't have such a positive view of Putin and Russia and warfare and the savagery it brings with it. All right, I think that covers everything. Yes, I think it covers everything for today. There was one other topic I had, but I will keep that. I will keep that. The reality is that NATO would crush the Russians in a matter of days if the Russians didn't have nuclear capabilities. There is no to compare the Ukrainians and the Russians on savagery, or to compare the Ukrainians and the Russians on blame, is to not understand the conflict. It's to be morally agnostic and morally it really is pathetic. I mean, Putin launched the war in 2008 against the Georgians. Putin launched the war in 2014 against the Ukrainians. Putin launched the war against Ukraine in 2021. There is nobody else to blame. Nobody else to blame for this war other than Putin. 100%, this is Putin's fault. The fact that Ukraine was fighting a civil war maybe is irrelevant to the fact that Russia is, Russia's to blame for that civil war as well. If you go back and you evaluate that history, all the deaths, all the savagery is on the hands, the blood is Putin's responsibility, is the Russians' responsibility. All right, let's see. Ian has a question. Yesterday, most towns in San Francisco Bay Area lost their zoning. They can't meet a deadline to submit compliant housing plans and are now subject to the builder's remedy, where you can build what you want as long as it includes 20% affordable housing. That is cool. I hope builders take advantage of this. I hope they do it quickly, and I hope they build a lot, because wow. I mean, I didn't realize that, but unfortunately, my sense is that housing authorities and town authorities and cities authorities would find other ways to restrict building other than zoning. You still need a permit, you still need other things. Maybe it's not a zoning, maybe it's other, maybe it's environmental, maybe there are lots of ways in which to slow down building. They will slow it down until they will slow it down until they actually get the zoning laws reinstituted. So I can't imagine that the building will actually happen. Ian says that it happened last year in Santa Monica, and there are thousands of units planned under the new builder's remedy. Let's see if they're built. I hope you're right. It would be fantastic if we get a massive spike of building residential real estate in California. That will have a huge contribution to quality of life in California. Will change the dynamics in California dramatically. So let's hope that actually happens. Anytime we can get rid of zoning, one more massive government interference in our lives, that's a good thing. Just to address some of the issues here, yes, I do believe the U.S. and NATO are blameless. Russia, if it had any semblance of morality and justice associated with it, would be vying to become a member of the European Union and maybe joining NATO themselves. Rather than doing what they have done since 2000, since 2000 or so. But certainly since 2008. Rand, thank you, Rand, $50. Here's a self-interested gift to myself. Beautiful, thank you. Andrew asks, well, by the way, about $50 short, so 50, so it should be pretty easy. $1 from everybody there would blow the target away. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's do this. Andrew says, to what extent if at all, is Israel in a new era of aggressive military action against its enemies? If so, it's action in a more rational direction. No, I mean, this is a continuation of policy that's been going on for the last 10 years. There's nothing new here. Israel is in a mode of holding its enemies at bay. It's not really in a mode of actually, destroying its enemies or reducing. It's just trying to maintain the status quo. In that, it is ultimately losing. It's not gaining. The Hezbollah today in Lebanon is much, much, much stronger than it was last time Israel engaged with it. While Israel has tried to eliminate weapons supplies from Iran to the Hezbollah, and they've done a lot of damage there. They still have not managed to get everything, and the Hezbollah is a significantly stronger power than it used to be. The Iranians today are in Syria, in spite of Israel bombing them, in spite of Israel trying to stop them. They are in Syria, and as such, they are in league with the Syrian government to some extent now. They are certainly in league with the Russians. They're in league with Islamist elements that are in Syria. So the Iranians are on the northeast border of Israel. Israel is at a strategic disadvantage there. And the reality is that Iran itself is stronger than it used to be. Who knows where they are in terms of nuclear developments? But certainly the Iranians have improved their missile capabilities, have improved their drone capabilities. They're not a massive threat to Israel yet, but they certainly are a threat, and a threat that Israel chips away at. But they chip it away just to slow the increase in threatness, in the degree of threat. They're not chipping away enough to actually eliminate the threat. To really reduce the capability of Iran to pose a threat to Israel, Israel would need the U.S.'s support in the sense of non-interference. Israel would have to be able to fly its airplanes over Iran. They would have to actually be destroying military facilities in Iran on a regular basis and with very big bombs. There's a reason why Iran builds many of its most sensitive facilities inside cities, because Israel is very, very careful about collateral damage. So Israel is not doing what it should or could or I think should do in order to defend itself. I think it's too little, and the Netanyahu government is not going to do any more than I think previous governments have done. Netanyahu has never shown a particular willingness to actually fight and to actually engage and to actually do the things necessary to protect Israel. Generally, I believe Netanyahu's, when it comes to threats to the security of the state of Israel, is quite wimpy. And there's no big difference between what he did and what the previous government of anti-Netanyahu forces did. Right? I despise Netanyahu for a lot of reasons, primarily because he's a slick guy who just wants to hold power. He gives a great speech in English. He gives a great interview in English. I'll grant you all that, and has forever. I have not liked Netanyahu since he started cutting deals with Yasser Arafat in the 1990s when he was prime minister. Would Ukraine have been invaded if it had nukes? No, it would not have. Some discussion on Twitter about giving that. What if any limits to the weapons we should give the Ukrainians? Your thoughts? I mean, I don't know that we should be giving the Ukrainian nukes, but certainly the fact that we were responsible for disarming them when they had nukes is a part of the challenge and the problem that they face. If we were 100% certain and unequivocal that Ukraine would always be a friend to the West and was part of the West and committed to the West, then certainly giving them nukes would be a possibility. Giving them nukes right now, I think, would be very dangerous, because I think that Putin could use a tactical nuke, and if Ukrainians had nukes and then escalate, give the Ukrainians opportunity then to escalate, and who knows where that would end, and all of Europe is could be destroyed as a consequence, and I think Europeans would not do it. But there is a real question about, for example, arming the Taiwanese with a nuke, or arming the Japanese with a nuke. The Japanese don't have nukes, and those are real considerations. Those are things that, at the strategic level, a proper American foreign policy would definitely try to take into account, to try to figure out. So, yeah, I mean, something to seriously consider. I don't think it's out of the question. I'm not sure. I don't think it makes sense in Ukraine, but certainly one should consider it with respect to Japan and Taiwan. Michael asked, did you hear about California's new mansion tax, 5% on any property above $5 million yearly? This should really cure all homelessness now. I mean, look, California is going to be desperate for revenue. As I've told you many times, California does well when the stock market does well. It gets capital gains taxes. But when the market does not do well, it is hungry for revenue, because California spends a huge amounts of money on social programs and other programs, mostly destructive programs. And therefore, it's going to milk the only people it can milk, and that is it's going to try to get as much money out of the rich and at the margin and keep, so they passed this temporary 3% increase on income above $1 million. And then, of course, it wasn't temporary, it was permanent. And they might have a mansion tax, and then the mansion tax won't just be $5 million, it'll be $2 million. And while I know the headlines are always about all the rich people leaving, the fact is that most of the people leaving California are poor people, and a lot of rich people stay and they pay those taxes, and revenue for California keeps increasing. So these things are going to keep happening, and California is just going to try to squeeze more and more and more out of a smaller and smaller pool of, out of whatever rich people they have. By the way, just a reminder, tonight I will be interviewing Gina Golan on the psychology of entrepreneurship and a bunch of other issues surrounding psychology and entrepreneurship and self-esteem. Gina's great, and the conversation is always fascinating. I encourage all of you to join and come on live and ask lots of questions. You ask me often a lot of psychological questions. Tonight's an opportunity to actually ask somebody who's an expert in psychology those questions, so jump in and do that. I also want to mention one of my sponsors. One of the sponsors for the show is the Ayn Rand University. If you're interested in studying objectivism, in learning about objectivism, either as an actual graded students, where you get people to actually review your homework and get a grade and do tests and all of that, the Ayn Rand University is the only place in the world where you can do that. And the courses are amazing. You can find that at university.aynrand.org. But also, if you want to just audit and listen in on the courses and see how the homework assignment are reviewed and so on. As some of you know, I will be teaching a course on public speaking in the summer. So any of you who want to audit that course, it would be a lot of fun. Again, university.aynrand.org, you get the whole program there. All right, Daniel is asking, list of guests I'd like to see. Scott McDonald to talk war, China. I would too. I've actually tried to contact Scott. I haven't gotten a response, so not sure. John Allison. John Allison's always kind of in the queue. At some point, we will definitely talk to John. Keith, I think Keith is in the list, so hopefully we'll have him on sometime this year. You have lots of physics questions for Keith, I can imagine. Thanks, Daniel. Daniel also said, one bright spot on military. They have leveraged digital engineering. For example, the B-21 is on time and on budget and looks sick as an F. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it seems like they get the act together, and then other times they're completely bureaucratized as one would expect. All right, we're like $30 short, so let's try to make the target as we always do. It would be great to get to our $250 target, as we almost every show do. Wanda Freeman says, I'm really psyched about tonight's show. Me too. And hopefully the rest of you will be too psyched about talking about psychology. Very, very clever use of words, but it's join us tonight. All right, Daniel also asked, this is the last Super Chat question, so if you want to help us reach our goal, only $30 short, you can make it happen with a $30 question. Please do so now, otherwise we'll end short. Chinese have changed positions if their power is threatened. For example, COVID. I think if Russia, Putin was defeated, it would lessen the chances of Chinese attempting to take Taiwan. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole war in Russia has given the Chinese real second thoughts about taking Taiwan. I think it's probably delayed Russia's plan to take Taiwan by days, months, not by days, months, by years, maybe longer than that. I think not only the military challenges that the Russians are facing in Ukraine, but also the fact that the West rallied on the side of Ukraine economically. And I think, it would be much harder for the West to do that with China, but it would also be a lot more damaging to China if the West did that. China is much more integrated into the world economy and into supply chains in the world than was Russia. Russia was primarily a one-product state, and that product was energy. China is in every single one of our products, so it would be really hard for both us and them to see such a thing. So I think we are seeing a delay in Chinese plan vis-a-vis its plans regarding Taiwan. Thank you, Larry. Really appreciate it. And Rand Coley, thank you. $50 got us over our target. And then on top of all of that, Frank did another $50, and he wrote, this is $50 for competing with Seder. Is objectivity measured evaluation, especially in relation to police work? Well, when it comes to the issue of justice, when it comes to the issue of metering out justice, which is partially the police and partially the judiciary system, objectivity is crucial. And being able, and the legitimacy of the rule of law, and the willingness of people to accept the rule of law and to live by the rule of law is dependent on their assumption that that the rule of law is objective. I don't think people would accept it. I don't think people would follow it. I don't think people would embrace a system of rule of law if it wasn't objective. So the objectivity of the law is essential. The objectivity of the execution of the law is essential for being able to actually have a peaceful society. I think without that, you get, quote, anarchy, and you get a much more violent society. And I think one of the problems today in American society is the lack of belief in the objectivity of law, whether there is systemic racism or isn't systemic racism. If enough people believe there is, that's going to create a lot of problems in the system. And one of the things that the government needs to do is make sure that they are convincing of people of the fact that the law is being applied objectively and is based on some objective standard, that it is a rational law. So yes, thank you, Frank. Great question. Mr. McMuffin, detailed book about Iran and American relations. I don't have one. I don't know of one. I've read books in the past about Iran. I can't recall right now. Nothing that I've read recently. I read a lot of articles, a lot of news reports. I'm trying. Yeah, I just can't think of a book written in the last 5 years that is particularly good on Iran, or that I've read out of interest because I thought it would be particularly good on Iran. All right, thank you, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. Don't believe some of the Russian propaganda that is on my chat right now. The idea that Russia has lost 20,000 troops in Ukraine is complete propaganda. They've lost many, many more than that, multiples of that. We have, just like we have Andrew Tate fans, we have Russia fans. Yaron Brook Show is a show that attracts a multitude of different points of view. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks to all the super chatters. You did great today. We blew through that target. Thank you again, particularly to Rand. Put in combined $100 to Frank with the $50, and whom I'm missing with another 50. that is Ian, will start us off with $50. So thank you all. Really, really appreciate it. I will see you all tonight. Don't forget tonight, Gina Golan should be a fabulous